Welcome students to a series of lectures on geosciences and remote sensing. Today the topic of lecture is global warming and the role of remote sensing. Global warming, what it is? We have been hearing this for the last few decades, global warming, and now we have reached to a stage where there is no controversy about global warming and its implications and consequences for the society. All academicians, bureaucrats, scientists, planners have no doubt now that global warming is happening, and it is very much in the midst of us. But let me tell you that this global warming which we are hearing nowadays is a buzzword, but this global warming is happening since centuries, or I should say since hundreds and thousands of years. If we look few hundred thousands of years, we will see that all this planet system was a ice, and life was very hostile. The civilizations we see nowadays is basically an evolution for the last 10,000 or 12,000 years, when the glaciers started receding, ice started melting, and the earth became a suitable place for the growth of the humans. Arrhenius, the Swedish chemist, got Nobel Prize for estimating exactly the quantum of the global warming, natural global warming. So natural global warming is there for hundreds and thousands of years, but the global warming we are talking nowadays is basically enhanced global warming because of the anthropogenic activities, because of the human activities on the surface of the earth, and that is a concern to all of us. If we look at the concentrations of these greenhouse gases, what are these greenhouse gases which lead to the global warming? It is the carbon dioxide, it is basically the methane, it is the nitrous oxide, and all of these have been growing at not at a natural pace because of these anthropogenic activities. They are growing at an alarming rate, and that is a cause of concern for us. If we look at the recent temperatures, if we see the hottest years, 15 hottest years in the history of earth have been since 1980. We are having irregular climate regimes, very cold sometimes, very hot some other times. We will see the sea level, it is rising, and it is rising alarmingly. Many coastal areas in the coastal zones are impacted because of the rise in the sea level. Some of impacts could be basically imagined or visualized very easily, and some of these impacts could not be, we cannot imagine or we cannot predict these. Flood disasters could enhance because of the climate change. Coastal areas will be inundated because of the rise in the sea level. Similarly, we may lose the wetlands. We are losing the wetlands, and we are attributing it to the global warming. The water bodies are receding, the glaciers are receding. So some of the known facts where we have no doubt, which have been basically proved beyond any doubt, or basically already taking place there. And some could be, basically we may not like we had problems with predicting the impacts of the ozone, depletion of the ozone layer. So we couldn't predict them. Similarly, there are many areas, gray areas, where we cannot predict how global warming is going to impact it. When we talk about the ice ages, 100,000 years back, the life was very hostile. Basically the environment was very hostile for the life, and with basically the natural warming of the earth system, the earth became more and more habitable to the humans, and now we see we have come to a population of 10 billion people. And when we talk, if we see 10,000 years before or 12,000 years before, our requirements as far as energy is concerned, food is concerned, were very limited, and all of us were basically adopting the greener technology, the cleaner technology, like these food. We have now food processing plants. We used to get these daily requirements of the food from windmills, from water mills, and it was all cleaner technology. But because of the population explosion, the energy available to us, energy resources available to us, fuel, firewood, and other, were not sufficient. So it was naturally that we had to switch to the other technology. And as the coal was very conveniently available to us, very cheap, and in large quantities all over the world. So people switch it for meeting their daily energy requirements. People switch it to the coal, which is basically a dirty, source of energy. We know that when we use the coal for generating the power, you see how much of greenhouse gases it is emitting. And after that, when we realized that, especially in the Western world, developed countries, when they started using the coal for meeting their energy requirements, for industrial development and for daily human activities also, we at certain stage realized that this is harming our environment. But at the same time, the energy requirements were increasing, a lot. So and with the explorations in this sector of oil and natural resource and hydrocarbons, so we had basically, we switched to, this was comparatively a cleaner compared to the coal, but we switched to the oil and natural gases, these for meeting our natural these requirements. And we see that what has happened, if we look at the consumption of these natural resources, these natural gas, oil and hydrocarbons, we see it has shooted up. With the consumption of the fossil fuels in the developed countries, the carbon dioxide level has increased a lot. And we have been, for the last 1 century, we have seen that 115% increase in the consumption of the carbon dioxide. And similarly, the other greenhouse gases like methane and nitrous oxide have also increased because of the increase in the agriculture activities. The sources of methane have also increased, and other human activities have been responsible for this. If we see that this methane almost for the last 1 century, it has increased by more than 215% increase in the methane, which is another very lethal source of to the global warming. The human induced global warming is basically warming the earth at a faster rate than what would have been if it would have been a natural global warming, and that was a cause of concern. So at present we have basically, if we see the concentration of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we see it is almost 470 parts per million. And similarly, this methane is 1800 parts per million. So it is increasing, and there has been a lot of research has been going on in the different aspects of this global warming, and they are just seeing different people, whether they are from geosciences, whether they are from biosciences or physical sciences. They are looking into different aspects of how it is going to impact different activities, different sectors, like how it is going to impact the disasters, how it is going to impact the agriculture, and how it is going to impact the livelihood of the people, and how people are adopting to these, how it is affecting the water resources, snow and glacier resources, which are very sensitive to this climate change, to this global warming. 50% of these glaciers basically has been receded. If we see even the recent past, some have reduced by 50%, some have reduced by even 70%, and some have basically reduced just not so much, maybe 10%, 5%. We have been doing this type of work. So similarly, in other areas also, we have seen that global warming is impacting and in a way it is impacting our daily activities. There was a controversy. People were saying that it is a natural warming, it is ice ages, then there will be a warm cycle, then there will be a cold cycle. But it was in the initial stage, I would say 2 decades before we were basically involved in this type of discussion. But now it has been proved that global warming is taking place, and it is basically enhanced due to the human activities on the surface of the earth. So all these planners, the politicians, the bureaucrats, the scientists decided, okay, if it is happening, how should we control it? So all of them just sat together and decided, okay, we should have a certain mechanism at the global level, whereby we can at least, we may not be able to arrest this global change, but at least we can slow down the pace of this global warming. And then came into existence the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And under this they said, okay, it is obligatory on us to reduce these emissions of greenhouse gases, so that we can at least slow down the pace of the global warming. And if we look at the entire global scenario, if we see this, let us see which are the countries which are responsible for the emission of these greenhouse gases, which are responsible for the global warming. If you see the US, United States, is the biggest emitter of these greenhouse gases. If we see the most 2 populous nations in the world, China and India, so they basically contribute a fraction of these emissions to the global warming. So they decided that should we have an equal yardstick, what should be the mechanism to control this? Is that the country, the nation which pollutes more or which emits more emissions should pay more, or should do more to arrest this or to bring down the pace of this global warming? So there was a consensus, and it was only in 1997 in Kyoto these policy makers, planners, and these heads of the states met in Kyoto, which is a city in Japan, and they decided, okay, let us have a certain protocol whereby we can make it obligatory on the nation states what should they do and how much they should do to bring down the pace of global warming. And it is named as such now Kyoto Protocol to the UNFCCC. So under this there was a very important component. They said, okay, if we look at the entire scenario, they said one activity which we can control. There are certain activities we cannot control. We cannot say that you stop using the fossil fuels, you stop for using fossil fuels for the industries, because that is very much related to our well-being, on the well-being of the society, well-being of the people. So they decided, okay, let us have certain mechanisms where we can basically reduce this. They said that, okay, the changes in the land use, land cover on the globe is contributing a lot to the emissions, carbon emissions. So a lot of deforestation, if we go to the tropical countries like Indonesia, if we go to the Brazil and all the tropical countries, so you will see a lot of deforestation is taking place. And when deforestation is taking place, that means you are basically emitting the carbon dioxide. So they saw that around 140 gigatons of carbon are emitted because of these changes in the land use land. So they immediately recognized that this is a one sector. This is a one sector which can basically help us to slow down the pace of this global warming. I mean, how did they propose it? They said that if we reduce the deforestation and if we increase the afforestation, if we increase the reforestation, naturally we are going to basically reduce these carbon emissions. So two mechanisms came out of this protocol. They called it CDM. CDM means Clean Development Mechanism and Joint Implementation. They said, okay, the countries which are contributing enormously to the global warming, like United States, like the Germany or other, like Great Britain and other developed countries in the Europe, or if you see the Australia is the second biggest emitter of these greenhouse gases. So they said that these countries basically should pay, because they have already achieved certain development. Now if we cannot equate India, China and United States, or we cannot equate India and Australia, we cannot equate China and United States. So these economies, these countries like India and China are still just developing. So they have to go with certain levels of these emissions, while as the United States have to appreciably reduce the emission levels, and also at the same time take certain measures which can help us to bring down the global warming. So these two mechanisms which I just talked about, the CDM, Clean Development Mechanisms, and Joint Implementation. Clean Development Mechanisms is that a developed country which is appreciably emitting these greenhouse gases will invest in the developing countries, like United States. United States will invest in India, or it will invest in China, or any other country in the South Asia or in the South America. They will invest in raising these plantations. If we increase the area under forests, we are sequestering more and more carbon dioxide. We are basically taking away more and more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and that will basically slow down the pace of global warming. So now if United States has to invest in certain developing countries like South Asia in plantations, so they will get certain credits under this protocol. They will get a credits for this. Similarly, if a developed country does the same mechanism, afforestation or reforestation, in other developed countries like Europe, like if we see the Eastern European countries, which are also in transition of development, they are not developed countries. So if we see the Poland, we say Czechoslovakia, we say, or other Baltic and Balkan countries, if we see, they are still not developed. So this, if a developed country invests in developed country, in so-called developed country, so this comes under the joint implementation, JI. If United States invested $1 billion in South Asia in any country for afforestation and reforestation, and United States has to get certain credits for it. We call it carbon credits. Okay, you have invested so much of money, you have created so many plantations. Okay, we will reduce your under the protocol, which is obligatory on all the nation states now. Under that, you will get certain credits. You can say, okay, this is what I did for bringing down the pace of global warming. So you will get certain, we call carbon credits. But the question was, everybody asked that if, let us say, United States says that they invested $1 billion or $2 billion in developing countries, and they planted trees over a certain area, 100 square kilometers, 500 square kilometers, 1 hectare, or what is the mechanism we can verify it? Because it happens that even if it has happened in the developed countries quite often, that the World Bank or certain other multinational multilateral institutions like Asian Development Bank invest there, but there is no account of it. It may not really, next year if they put 100 hectares of plantations, the next year they can, there may be not 100 hectares. If the first year they get credit for 100 hectares, will next year this credit they get? And also there is a growth of plants. As the trees will grow more and more, they will sequester more and more carbon. So the country should get more next year, they should get more credits than the previous year, if it is growing at certain pace, or if this plantation is still there. But it may happen that this plantation is destroyed because of storm, because of cyclone, or because of certain human interventions could be there, that people cut these trees. And does the country which has invested there get the same credits, or they get less credits? So who can verify it? So a lot of it was deliberated. It was in different meetings at different places all over the globe. So they called it COP, and ultimately they said that there is one technology which can verify, which can basically account and credibly verify this, and that was recognized as the remote sensing. So remote sensing is one technology which can basically give us credible estimates of these clean development mechanisms, especially the afforestation, reforestation and deforestation mechanisms, and we can see that over a period of time how it is changing, at what rate it is growing. So this was all agreed in that it is the remote sensing which will give us credible these estimates. I hope some of you or all of you may be knowing about the remote sensing. Remote sensing is basically sensing the Earth's surface remotely using certain devices we call sensors, and they are on board the satellites, they are on board the aeroplanes, they are on board these balloons also. So, and we have different types of remote sensing. We can say that we have optical remote sensing, which is sensitive to the visible part of the spectrum. We have microwave remote sensing, we have thermal remote sensing, but two basically regions of the electromagnetic spectrum, or two regions of the these remote sensing which were basically thought that they have the potential for these afforestation, reforestation, deforestation activities, was optical remote sensing and the micro remote sensing. Individually, if we use this optical remote sensing and if we use the micro remote sensing, we can basically get a very good idea of increase in the biomass, increase in the rate of growth of these. But if we use them complementary also, that also helps us to get a better idea in the about this carbon estimation, and how we can basically verify these, whether it is under clean development mechanisms or whether it is under the joint implementations. So in the next lecture I will be talking how this technology could be used, but let me conclude up to this that what we talked in this lecture. So we started with what is global warming, and we started what are the consequences of global warming and how there has been global warming. It could be the natural global warming which is there since ice ages, and the recent, since the pre-industrial revolution, just 100 years or 200 years, we have been seeing an enhanced increase of carbon dioxide due to the anthropogenic activities. We talked about different ways, and we talked that how the global community were concerned about this and how they deliberated on this issue at different fora across the different countries in the world. And then ultimately there came the United Nations Framework Convention, and how then after that evolved the Kyoto Protocol to the UNFCCC, and ultimately the two mechanisms were devised, that was clean development mechanism and the joint implementation. So, and it was also recognized that the only technology which can basically monitor or which can make a verification of the activities being taken under the CDM and the joint implementation is only remote sensing. And also I talked about that there is a different types of the remote sensing, and optical remote sensing and micro remote sensing, they could individually be used to for this purpose, or they could have, we could have a complementary use of these two types of the remote sensing to develop a credible and accountable carbon accounting system. Okay students, this is all we discussed in the first part of the lecture. In the second part of this lecture, we will be talking about the technology itself, the remote sensing technology, the potentials and constraints of this technology. Until then, goodbye.